Good morning, Flatirons. This morning I am joining you backstage with two of our worship volunteers. We've got Brian, he plays electric, coolest instrument ever. And you might have noticed Lindsay, she's actually on staff as one of our worship leaders. Brian, you've been here since like the dawn of time. How long have you been on our volunteer
about
team?
10 years now, yeah.
10?
Quite a bit, yeah.
And Lindsay, you were actually my first person, I don't know if you remember this, way back in the day that I met.
I remember.
Pretty memorable. How many years have you been around here?
I've been around Flatirons for about 8 years, on the team for 7.
Okay. So, Brian, I would love to know, what is like one of your favorite memories in the decade you've been here?
Oh man, I think the last one was this last Easter, 2020, or 20, I guess 2021 now. It's all kind of a time hole. But you know, playing over everybody getting baptized was just special. Watching parents baptize their kids, you know, spouses baptized. I mean, it was just really powerful stuff. It was a privilege. It was awesome.
For those people that are a little bit nervous, maybe they're thinking about volunteering with worship, what would you say to them?
I'd say do it. Pull the trigger. Let it rip. I mean, it's a great batch of people. It's a great place to serve. It's a great place to hone your craft. So, you know, whatever nerves you're feeling, anything about it, just do it. Just go for it. Let it rip.
Okay. And so you're actually a dad of 3, right? One COVID baby?
3 little boys, yeah.
How on earth do you find time between this and that?
It's rough. I mean, honestly, my wife, she's also a musician. We just make time for it. We know that she knows that I'm a better dad when I get to play guitar. So, you know, she's like, go, do it, make it happen.
Lindsay, this one's for you. How would someone get involved, say if they, you know, maybe sing in the shower like myself, would love to jump on the team? What would be my next step?
Wow, lucky for us. Dang. Yeah, we love new volunteers. We love building our teams, and we are actually in a spot right now building our teams across all 5 of our campuses. And so we're looking for if you have a music background, if you love to sing, if you're a shower singer like Corey, and you want to serve, we would love for you to come be a part of this. If you have no background in music at all, we have a production team that makes us run. We could not do anything without our production team. So if you have an interest in running our lights or lyrics or learning about mixing audio, we have a space for you as well. So if you go to flatirons.com/volunteer, there's an inquiry for either production or worship, and that will come directly to us, and we'll get you connected within a week.
All right, I'm going to let these two go. If they're late, we're in big trouble. So you guys get out of here. Like Lindsay was saying, we have a lot of opportunities online at flatirons.com/volunteer. So if you're looking for a place to volunteer, that's the place to go. Maybe you're in the middle of our 35-day challenge. If you don't, go ahead and download the app right now to see what we're talking about. This is an excellent place to go to figure out how to fill that little serve box within that. We would love to hear from you. One more time, flatirons.com/volunteer.
Never should I stumble and fall. Be the rock on which my feet stand upon. And when I don't hear your voice, promise you'll still come close to me. Be the refuge where I know I can run. Be a stronghold I can never break from. And when I don't feel your touch, God, I know you're enough for me. Come on, we sing. Come a little closer. So come a little closer. Stay a little longer, God. You don't have to chase my heart. Anything you want, you got. So come a little closer. Stay a little longer, God. You don't have to chase my heart. Anything you want, you got. Shelter from the storms in my life, and be the fountain that will never run dry. And when I don't sense your love, you have not given up on me, no, and you never will. So come a little closer, stay a little longer, God. You don't have to chase my heart. Anything you want, you got. Come a little closer, stay a little longer, God. You don't have to chase my heart. Anything you want, you got. You don't have to chase my heart. Anything you want, you got. Hey, who's happy to be in the presence of our God this morning? Come on, lift up a shout of praise in this place. Let's put our hands together like this. Spirit, come and move in me. Found my freedom in you. Anything you want, you got. Anything you want, you got. Spirit, come and have your way. All my life is made new. Anything you want, you got. Anything you want, you got. We say, Spirit, come and move in me. be afraid. I don't wanna be afraid. And I don't wanna fear the storm just because I hear it roar. I don't wanna fear the storm. I don't wanna fear the storm. Come on, let's sing. Peace be still, say the word, and I will set my feet upon the sea till I'm dancing in the deep. Peace be still, you are here, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. So I'm not gonna be afraid, 'cause these waves are only waves. I'm not gonna be afraid. No, I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm not gonna fear the storm, 'cause you are greater than this roar. I'm not gonna fear the storm. No, I'm not gonna fear it. Oh, yeah. Peace be still, say the word, and I will set my feet upon the sea till I'm dancing in the deep. Love, peace be still, you are here, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. Peace, peace, yeah, over So let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me, in your holy name. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. So let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. So let
This is our declaration this morning. If you need faith, if you need God to speak peace over your life, would you sing this with us? Let faith rise up in me. Sing it again. So let faith rise up. Oh, heart, believe it. Let faith rise up in me. So let faith rise up. Oh, heart, believe it. Let faith rise up in me. Peace be still, take the way, and I will set my feet upon the sea until I'm dancing in the deep. Let peace be still when you are here, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. Peace, yeah, over me, Jesus. You say peace, and you bring peace, yeah, over me. Amen. Flatirons, we're so glad you guys are here in this room singing with us right now. Would you take a second and say hi to someone around you that you don't know before you take a seat? And if you're joining us online, as always, we love you guys. We can't wait to have you back in the room. Grab a cup of coffee and sit down and enjoy the rest of our service with us. Hey, you guys might have seen walking in the building today that we have tables set up in the lobby, and we're talking about serving today, and serving is a huge part of what we do around here, so check out this awesome video.
Three, two, one, lights.
I think normally around here when we do a volunteer push, everything's on fire. We need you, we desperately need you, we need you to jump in and do this and that. And I think for the first time ever, we have teams in place that everything's fine, everything's stable. And I think if you've been coming here for even just a little bit of time, you've noticed that. You've seen that there's incredible teams in place.
Okay, cameras, just hold tight now during the service.
But you might be sitting here week by week going, I need something bigger. I need community, I need to be known, I need to feel known. And as you sit here and you think about that, what would change in your life if you stepped in to serve in some way, shape, or form? We're not in a spot right now where we need something from you. We're in a spot right now where it's like, hey, we have something for you.
It's gonna be fun.
We have something for you to jump in and serve Jesus and serve what Jesus is already doing through this place. It's not Flatirons doing it. It's not kids ministry doing it. It's not the security team doing it. It's what is Jesus doing through this place already that I now get to jump on board with. The ripple effect of that, the change in that, the impact that has on the kids and families and people that walk through these doors, the single moms and single dads who get to catch a breath for the first time in a long time, the impact that it has on our cities and our communities and our state and the wider population as a whole is astronomical. What would change if you jumped in and served? What would change if you jumped in and said yes to what Jesus is already doing here instead of trying to reinvent the wheel? What would change in your life, in your city, in your community if you just jumped in and said yes?
When the night
crumble to the sea. I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, stand by me, oh, stand by me, oh, stand by me, stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, would you stand by me, oh, stand by me, oh, stand by me, stand by me.
Here's what amazes me about our band is that they can play this like classic oldie but goodie Stand By Me and nail it, and then who knows, probably by next week the same people will be playing Metallica or something. They're amazing. Give it up for them. I'm a little frustrated though because I asked if I could play the triangle and they said no. I'll be fine. Hey, so I'm an old soul, so I love old soulful music like that, but we didn't pick that song just because I like it or because it's recognizable or anything. We picked it because it actually has a lot to do with what we're going to be learning today. And so I actually want you to take the idea of standing by each other and kind of file that away in the back of your brain, because later in this talk, it's all going to make sense. You're going to go, okay. All right, so hey, we're in the middle of this 35-day challenge. There's thousands of us doing this together right now. And what we're doing is we're trying to take the four main areas of our lives. Jesus said that we should love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so we're trying to take these four areas of our lives and love God with them by essentially like engaging in a spiritual training program. That's what the 35-day challenge is. We've even got this app. It's not too late for you to download it and get started with us. We got this app that's got this daily checklist on it. And so every day for 35 days straight, we're doing 5 things. Right, the first thing is we're trying to engage in 15 minutes of physical activity. That's our way of reminding ourselves that we are in control of our bodies and not the other way around. So we're doing physical activity, we're reading our Bible, we're praying, we're sacrificing something, which is to say we're giving up something good to make room for something even better, and then we're finding ways to serve. All right, we're doing those 5 things every single day for 35 days straight. If you miss an item or you miss a day, you got to go back to day 1 and start at the beginning again. And for the last few weeks in this room, what we've been doing is we're just teaching about the importance of all of those spiritual practices. And so Jim has already taught on physical and sacrifice and prayer so far. And now today it's time to talk about serve, which, if I'm being honest, that has been the most difficult part of the 35-day challenge for me, and the same for my wife, Allie. Here's why I think it's been difficult for me. Like for me, Bible reading and prayer and physical, it's like check. Those are things that I already typically do in my normal daily routine. And then sacrifice, check, that hasn't been too bad. But then every single day when I look at my phone and I see the word serve, I'm just like, ugh. If I'm being, I know that's not what you want to hear your pastor say, but I'm just being honest with you. First of all, maybe you've felt this way. There have been days where I can't think of a way to serve. That's happened, and Allie feels that way too. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Allie was like, can I count like one of the hundreds of things that I do every single day for my kids? She's like, can I check off serve because I fed them today? And honestly, I was like, I don't know, can I do that too? I find myself asking Allie way more often than I used to. I'm like, what do you need today? I do that all the time. Like, hey, do you want some time to yourself? I'll chill with the kids. You take a nap. You get out of the house. And then anytime that she's like, nah, I'm good, I get frustrated. I'm like, that's what I was going to do to serve today. Like, help a guy out. Even when the opportunity arises and an idea for serving is like easy and right in front of my face, I'll be honest, half the time I do it begrudgingly. It's like my heart isn't in the right place. An example of that is the other day I'm at the grocery store and there's this lady who's walking out. She's trying to push 2 shopping carts, both of them filled with food. She's pushing 2 shopping carts. She's all wobbly. I'm walking in as she's walking out, and I'm thinking of the app, and I'm like, serve. So I run over there, and I'm like, hey, let me push one of these for you. And I'm making small talk with her and still making small talk with her. And still, it was like 20 minutes later, she had parked at the other end of the parking lot. And I'm all smiles chatting with this lady. If I'm being honest, in my head, I'm like, woman, you didn't think this through. Like, if you're gonna buy enough food for an army, you should park closer. I push the shopping cart to her car, I say goodbye. Later, when I get back in my car, I pull up the app, I check off serve, and I check off physical. Killed 2 birds with 1 shopping cart, as they say. On the crazy chance that you are the woman with 2 shopping carts and you're here today, I'm sorry about my black heart. You should have parked closer, but I'm sorry about my black heart. The reason I feel safe telling you guys about how I've struggled with serving is because I've talked to a lot of you, and a lot of you have told me that, yeah, serve has been the trickiest part of this 35-day challenge. And so my question is why, right? Why is the serve thing so difficult? And here's what I think a lot of it boils down to, is that this is one of those things that we can make up a lot of excuses for why we can't or shouldn't do this serve thing. Right, for example, a lot of us are busy and stressed. That's basically all of us, right? So work is insane. We've got projects around the corner, and family is crazy. We're playing chauffeur with the kids, and school is more difficult than we thought it was going to be, and we have deadlines around the corner. We've got this packed calendar filled with places to go and people to meet and things to do, and so we start telling ourselves, I don't have the time to serve. Right, that's some of us, and then maybe for others of us, we're going, hey, listen, I'm the one who needs served right now, and that's okay. Some of us are just in the middle of some rough road right now. We're in between jobs or going through a divorce or staring down foreclosure, you name it, and we feel like we don't have the money or the means to serve anyone right now, and so we start telling ourselves, I don't have the capacity to serve. What we're telling ourselves is like, if anyone needs help right now, it's me. But then for others of us, and my guess is the majority of us, if we're being really, really honest, we just don't want to serve. I mean, it's the least enticing item on the 35-day checklist. Here's what I mean by that. So like physical, well, that'll be good for me, right? Bible reading, well, I might learn something. Prayer, oh, I could use some time to get my thoughts sorted out anyway. Sacrifice, I could use a break from social media and alcohol or whatever it is you chose to sacrifice. I could use that break from it anyway. And then we get to serve, and it's like, well, what good does that do me? With all the other stuff on the checklist, we can see how it might benefit us, but when it comes to serve, if we're being honest, we end up getting selfish. Or I'll speak for myself. I end up getting selfish. That's what I've done. And if I'm being really honest, when I get to that part of my checklist, I tell myself I don't have the desire to serve. Why? Well, because I don't see how it could like immediately benefit me. And I don't think I'm alone in feeling that way. And so here's what I want to do today. I want to take a quick trip through the Bible to take a look at what God has to say about serving, to see if we can't figure out why we would serve, how we should serve, and what we might be able to do to serve. All right, and to do this like kind of quick journey through the Bible, I want to start back in the Old Testament, because this idea of serving others has always been close to God's heart, and it's always been a part of his plan for us in the world. And so we're going to go back to a book called Isaiah chapter 1. All right, Isaiah is a prophet. And at this time, the way prophets worked is they were basically spokespeople for God. So God would give his prophet, Isaiah, a message, and then he would tell Isaiah to go to that city full of tens of thousands of people and tell them the message from me. And honestly, the message was almost never, hey, Isaiah, I want you to go to that city and tell them that they're crushing it. Right? They're doing great. Give them a pat on the back and an attaboy from God. That's not the case. Like most of the time, it's like, hey, Isaiah, I want you to go into that city filled with thousands of hostile people and tell them that their city will be destroyed if they don't start living differently. And that's what Isaiah has to do in chapter 1 of his book, Isaiah. But what's interesting about this chapter to me is that this message from God completely revolves around the way in which the Israelites are serving. All right, so let's look at this together. Isaiah 1, the multitude of your sacrifices, what are they to me, says the Lord. So this is God speaking. He says, I have more than enough of burnt offerings, of rams, and the fat of fattened animals. Stop bringing meaningless offerings. Your incense is detestable to me. And your new moon festivals and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They've become a burden to me, and I'm weary of bearing them. Now, because culture has changed so much, we might kind of lose what's happening right there. So if God were to say something similar, if we're going to kind of like update that so that it would make sense for us living in the 21st century, basically what God just said sounds like this. He goes, hey, the amount of money you're tithing, what is that to me? Stop writing me meaningless checks, and your sermons and your worship songs are detestable to me. And then if you really want to go all the way in, he's going, the little orange stickers that you put on your cars, my soul hates them. He goes, it's a burden to me, and I'm weary of bearing it. It's harsh language. Now, you would be right to be thinking to yourself, like, I thought all those things were good things that God wants us to be doing. Absolutely. But the point that he's making in Isaiah is that we were never supposed to serve God at the expense of serving other people. That's what God starts talking about next. Look at this. He says, wash and make yourselves clean. Take your evil deeds out of my sight. Stop doing wrong and learn to do right. So he goes, stop engaging in meaningless religion and let's get back to the right things. What are the right things that we're supposed to get back to? Next verse. Seek justice, encourage the oppressed, defend the cause of the fatherless, and plead the case of the widow. In other words, go find someone who needs served and serve them. See, God's problem is never this. God's problem is never like getting together at church on the weekend and singing worship songs and listening to a sermon, you name it. He loves those things. He tells us to do those things. Instead, God's problem is when we do those things and then we call it good. We pat ourselves on the back and we were like, we were good little Christians this week. I made it to church on time. I learned a Greek word in the sermon. I didn't flip anyone off in the parking lot. And you should see our parking lot. That's a miracle, right? I'm doing a great job. I'm following Jesus. God's problem is whenever we think we can worship him without serving other people. He says that whenever we do away with serving other people, we've done away with the very heart of what it means to follow God in the first place. And at that point, we are engaging in hollow, meaningless religion, which God hates. What we learn in Isaiah is that you can't worship God without serving others. Let's fast forward in our Bible trip to when Jesus, God in the flesh, is walking around planet Earth in Mark chapter 10. Because there's this moment where two of Jesus' disciples, James and John, they pull Jesus aside and make a request of him. Look at this. They say this, hey, Jesus, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. And Jesus simply replies by going, you don't know what you're asking. He goes, you don't know what you're talking about. And they didn't. Because at the time, James and John don't realize yet that yes, Jesus is king, but Jesus isn't the kind of king that they're imagining. They're imagining that Jesus is going to be like a literal ruling king over Jerusalem. And so what they just ask Jesus is they go, hey, when you end up finally kicking tail and taking names and you become king, can we please sit at your right and your left of your throne, in your throne room? They have the audacity to ask to be very important people in Jesus' kingdom. And that's not what following Jesus is all about. And so Jesus gets all of his disciples together to set them straight. And he says this. He goes, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them, but not so with you. They lived in Roman-occupied territory, and so he goes, look at the Romans, all right? When you see the Romans, you see power-hungry people who want to lord their power and their authority over other people, and they call it greatness. But you are not going to live that way. Instead, Jesus says this, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. And so if you're following Jesus, greatness gets flipped upside down. If you want to be great, you have to become a servant. Why? Well, because we follow Jesus, and that's how Jesus lived his life, which is the very next thing he says. Pay close attention to this verse. It's crazy. This is Jesus speaking. He says, "For even the Son of Man," that's Jesus, "did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, time out, because that verse is a trip if we're paying attention to it. That is your God speaking. And what your God just told you is he says, hey, listen, I'm not here so that you can serve me. I am here so that I can serve you. You know how, like whoever's president at the time, usually a few times a year, they'll go do normal person stuff, you know? So they'll go like read a book to first graders in elementary, or they'll go serve food at a soup kitchen. And the whole thing is like, so that we can look at them and go, even though they're great, even though they're powerful, they're like normal people. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty. They spend time with people like me. What Jesus just said is that, but on crack and for real, all right? Jesus, the God of the universe, in human flesh just said, no, listen, really, I'm genuinely here to do nothing but serve you. That's crazy. I did not come to be served, but to serve. You fast forward again, and the very first Christians, they latched onto this idea of a strong God who serves. And Paul, in Acts 17, he's talking to some people in Athens, Greece, and he says this. He says, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and he does not live in temples built by hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. That's what Jim talked about last weekend. What could we possibly offer God that he doesn't already have? Then Paul goes a step further. He goes, he himself, God himself is the one who gives all men life and breath and everything else. God is busy serving you. He doesn't need anything from you. What Paul and Jesus are saying is the same thing. They're going, hey, thankfully, we don't have a God who is needy. He doesn't need a thing from you. He's not sitting in some outer space, far away heaven, wringing his hands, going like, I can't accomplish what I want to accomplish in this world until Ben starts serving me better. He's not whiny and he's not needy. God isn't looking to be served in that way. Instead, he's looking to serve us. And then Jesus goes, hey, look, so the way that I treat you, like with grace and mercy and love as if I'm your servant, that's how I want you to treat each other. Don't serve me. I'm good. Instead, serve each other. What we learn through Jesus is that we serve because Jesus first served us. That's the answer to the why question. Why should we serve? And the answer is not to like earn brownie points with God or earn our way into heaven by the time we die. Instead, we serve simply because we're trying to make our lives look like Jesus's life. And Jesus spent his life serving other people. Why should we serve? We serve because Jesus first served us. But then on top of that, like Jesus didn't just spend his life serving other people, he also served other people through his death. And that's what I want to talk about now, because when you look at Jesus dying on a cross, we can learn something about how we should serve other people. All right, so at around the age of about 33, Jesus is arrested. He's rung up on false charges in essentially a kangaroo court, and he's executed. And a lot of people want Jesus dead. And that's because he keeps saying he's the Son of God. He keeps saying that he's the king of his people. Sometimes he's even implying that he is God in the flesh. And so people want him dead because they think he's committing the crime, the punishable crime of blasphemy. And at the time, according to this law, it technically, by law, would have been the right thing to do to kill Jesus, if only he wasn't telling the truth. And so Jesus is nailed to a cross, he dies, and then 3 days later, God resurrects Jesus from the dead. It sounds crazy because it is. It hasn't happened before that, and it hasn't happened since. And now we can look back, and because of the Bible, we learn that Jesus was paying the price for all of our sinfulness on the cross. Romans 6 says the wages for sin is death, and so the price to pay for our sinfulness is death. And Jesus on the cross paid that for us so that you and I don't have to pay that for ourselves. If you are a Christian, all of our hope, trust, and faith is placed in the moment that Jesus died on the cross and the moment 3 days later when God raised him back to life. And it might sound morbid at first, but we believe that that is the best news that has ever been shared with the world. We view Jesus' death on the cross as the ultimate, greatest, no one is ever going to top it act of service. It is the ultimate proof that Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve. But then on top of all that, we can learn something about how we should serve one another by paying attention to the way Jesus composed himself on that cross. Here's what I mean by that. Even at Jesus' weakest moment, when he is the most beaten and most bloodied and most incapacitated, because like crucifixion was just an absolutely brutal way to die. Even at a moment like that, when Jesus is crushed under the weight of torture and death and the sin of the world, what does he do? He stands up straight under that weight, and he continues to serve the people around him. And we can see that by some of the stuff that he says while he's hanging on the cross. Let's look at a couple of these things. So at one point, Jesus is hanging on the cross, and he looks down and he sees his mother, Mary, and he sees one of his disciples, John. And he says this: when Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple he loved, that's John, standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Dear woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, the disciple took Mary into his home. What's happening here? Well, even as Jesus is dying, he's taking care of his family. Most Bible scholars believe that Joseph, Mary's husband, is dead at this point. And so Jesus is just taking care of family business. He's serving his mom, serving Mary, by making sure that John is going to look after her and take care of her after Jesus is gone. Even while dying on the cross, Jesus stands up straight and he takes care of his family. At another moment, while he's on the cross, he's looking at the crowd, and the crowd is nuts and out of control. Right? You've got Roman soldiers, they're the ones actually performing the execution. And then you've got people in the corner throwing dice, and they're gambling to see who gets to win Jesus' clothes. And there's just this mob of people screaming and shouting and cheering and throwing stuff at Jesus. And even in the middle of this riotous mob, Jesus says this. He goes, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." Jesus looks at his murderers and he prays for their forgiveness, the forgiveness that he's about to make possible by dying on the cross. Even while hanging on the cross, Jesus stands up straight and he extends forgiveness. Last moment. So Jesus is actually not alone. He's being crucified with two other criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And eventually, at one point, one of these criminals turns to Jesus and he says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Remember, this guy is a criminal, and he's literally minutes from his own death. And most of us would go like, "Dude, too late. Too late for you," right? You lived a selfish, crappy life, and there's no take-backsies on your deathbed. That's not how Jesus replies, though. Instead, Jesus says this. He goes, "I tell you the truth, today you're going to be with me in paradise." Remember, he's a criminal, and he's hanging on the cross. He's out of time. He doesn't have time to hop off the cross and go, "Now let me prove through my actions how sorry I really am and how much I really want to follow you." He doesn't have time to do that. He's out of time. And Jesus still looks at him and he goes, "Today you're going to be with me in paradise." Even while dying on the cross, Jesus stands up straight and he offers the gift of life. And in all three of those moments, what we see is that even though the weight of death is threatening to crush Jesus, he stands up straight and he serves the people around him. Now, here's something interesting about crucifixion, all right, and like what it does to a person and what it does to the human body. Maybe a lot of us don't know this, but for most people who were hung on crosses, and there were lots of people hung on crosses back in Rome's heyday, all right? But for the people who are hung on crosses, they don't typically die of shock or pain, and they don't die of blood loss. Typically, they die of asphyxiation. They cannot breathe anymore. The reason that happens is, for example, Jesus is nailed to the cross in 3 different places, all right? Once through each wrist into the wood, and his arms are kind of up and above his head, and then his feet are stacked on top of each other, and there's a nail that goes through both of his feet into the base of the cross. And for people who were crucified, their shoulders would become dislocated almost immediately. And so then their bodies would sag, and it causes hyperexpansion in the chest muscles and in the lungs, which results in severe difficulty trying to breathe. And for people who were crucified, it would eventually get so bad that the only way to breathe, and certainly the only way to speak, is if you push up off the nail in your foot, and you just put up with the excruciating pain of doing that so that you can just straighten your chest and straighten out your lungs and get a breath and then speak. Why am I getting into all this brutal information about crucifixion? It's because even though it's terrible to think about, I believe it gives us this beautiful picture of how Jesus serves us and how we should serve the people around us. And here's what I mean by that. In all of those moments on the cross that you and I just read together, every single time Jesus spoke up in order to serve people, the only way for him to do that is to literally stand up straight. The only way it's physically possible for him to speak those words of life and to speak forgiveness and to take care of his family is to push up off the nail in his foot and stand up tall in order to speak and to serve. In other words, the image of Jesus on the cross is not pathetic. Erase that trash from your brain. I hate every image of Jesus, every idea of Jesus, and every painting and movie of Jesus that portrays him as some weak, whiny man who's like, can you just please stop sinning and can you please follow me? I don't want to follow a God like that. Jesus was not pathetic. Jesus was tough as nails, literally. And the image that we should have in our minds when we think of Jesus on the cross is not the image of the weak, dying teacher. Instead, it is the image of the strong God who serves. The image of the cross is not an image of Jesus crumpled down, begging for death to come quick. Instead, it is the image of the God of the universe in human flesh, inviting the pain, pushing up off the nail in his foot in order to speak life into the people around him. Jesus on the cross is the image of God standing straight and tall with his arms out under the burden of the world, committed to serving people around him, even with his dying breath, even if it's the last thing he's ever going to do. I'll follow a God like that. And that's the kind of God we have. So remember the why, right? Why should we serve other people? The answer is simply we serve because Jesus first served us. But how? How should we serve? Well, we should serve like Jesus served, which is we're not whiny and pathetic about it. We don't grumble about it. We're not trying to find some way out of it. Instead, like Jesus, we should stand up straight with our arms out. And just stand up straight under the weight of real life, which is usually really heavy, and stand up straight with our arms out, open and inviting to the people around us, ready to serve. How should we serve? We should serve in a Christ-like way, which means like Jesus. We stand up straight with our arms out. What can we do to serve? Well, there's lots of ways to serve. You know, you can push the shopping cart and you could pay for someone's dinner, or if you want to do like the absolute bare minimum, I guess you could hold a door or something. Like we've already talked about here out in our lobby at Lafayette, and then at all of our campuses, you can talk to your campus pastor. Like you can serve here and volunteer on the weekend here if you're just like out of ideas. You can go and do that in the lobby like in the next minute. You just sign up and do it. But even that is just like typically most of our volunteer stuff is one day a week. And so what do we do to routinely serve other people? And I believe that if we want to jump into the deep end, I think we can take a cue from what Jesus did on the cross. You stand up straight with your arms out to take care of our families, to extend forgiveness or an apology, and to offer a gift of life. Quickly, here's what I mean by those things. First thing, take care of your family. It's like maybe your marriage is feeling stale and routine and loveless and distant, or maybe you're even afraid that your marriage is on the rocks and you're not going to make it. Like, what would it look like to be Christ-like in the middle of a marriage like that? And what I mean is stand up straight under the weight of the intimacy that you feel like is lost, or under the weight of the fear that the two of you aren't going to make it. Stand up straight under that burden with your arms out. How can I serve her today? How can I serve him today? What does my spouse need that I might be able to take care of? For others of us, I know your stories. And I know you're absolutely crushed under the weight of parenthood right now. It's like your kids are sick, and not just sick, like they're very sick, they're scary sick, and they've been that way since day one. For others of us, our kids have spiraled into depression and anxiety and isolation, and we just don't know what to do about it. And if that's you, I would encourage you. I'd encourage you by saying, like, I don't think you have to have all the answers today, because who knows what tomorrow holds. Instead, I'd encourage you, in the midst of all that, to be like Jesus for your kids, which means to stand up straight under the weight of the burden you're carrying with your arms out. How can you serve that kid today? How can you be the image of God in your home today? Take care of your family. We can also serve by standing up straight with our arms out to extend forgiveness or an apology. Because for some of us, we've been hurt, but if we're being honest, we have carried the grudge for far too long, and we know it. You know, and the person who hurt us, like, they don't even know what to do anymore. They're crushed under the weight of that grudge. They don't know how to fix it. They feel stuck. And then for others of us, we hurt someone else, and we were hoping we could just kind of brush it under the rug and move on, and everyone would forget about it. But the person that we've hurt has not forgotten about it, and they've not moved on. So stand up straight. Stand up straight, even though it feels like you're taking a hit to your pride or a hit to your ego. Stand up straight with your arms out and serve that person by saying, I forgive you, or by saying, I'm sorry. Release them from the burden of a grudge. And then we can also serve people by standing up straight with our arms out to offer a gift of life. And here's what I mean by that. Like, all of us in this room can think of someone who's hurting right now, all of us. And you know what would go a really long way for that person? If you just offered them a gift that brought a little life into their day today. Like the reminder that someone is thinking about them and loves them and has their back. So stand up straight. In this instance, you got to stand up straight under our own tendency to be selfish. Right? Stand up straight under all of your problems that take up all of your time because you have to solve them. Stand up under the weight of all of your own problems with your arms out and selflessly serve someone else by taking the sting out of their day. A couple weeks ago, my whole family was sick. Allie was sick, I was sick, and all three of our kids were sick. It was miserable. But at the same time, we had friends come and drop stuff off for our family. Like they would drop off dinner, or they dropped off medicine. They even dropped off like little coloring books and activity books for my kids. And it was just those little acts of kindness, that little acts of servanthood that blessed my family. It was just encouraging to know that someone thought about us. Little gifts of life. Listen, here's the truth. If we want to serve like Jesus served us, we cannot wait until it's convenient. And we can't wait till we've solved all of our own problems. When is that ever going to happen? Right? And we can't wait until the checking account is full and the emergency funds and the savings account and the retirement fund is stocked. We can't wait for all of this stuff. If we want to serve like Jesus served us, we just have to serve now. No matter what, no matter where. And it looks like this in 2 Corinthians 4, 8-9 says this, we're hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Jesus served us on the cross so that we can stay standing under the weight of real life, which is really heavy. And Jesus looks at us and he goes, the same power available to me that made me stand up on that cross is now available to you. So go and face the people around you and say to them, I'm hard pressed and perplexed and persecuted and struck down, but I am not destroyed. And because I am not destroyed, I'm going to stand up straight with my arms out. I'm going to figure out how can I sacrifice myself to serve you today. So it's just like that song that we played at the very beginning of this thing, Stand By Me. That could technically be a worship song. For real, like you could say those words to Jesus. You could say, hey, when the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light I'm going to see, I won't be afraid as long as you stand by me. That'll preach. We could sing that. It's the same thing. Thankfully, Jesus stood by us and he stood up straight with his arms out. Even with his dying breath, we have a God who has stood by and will stand by us, even in the worst of times. And then he tells us to turn and face the world and show the world what Jesus is like by standing by them, even in the worst of times. And here's the truth. You know what we don't need more of? This is my opinion. In our world, we don't need more opinions. We don't need more arguing. We don't need more people going like, I need boundaries right now because I'm trying to figure out my own stuff and I need some of my own space. And we don't need more churches filled with more people who are going to come and sit and listen to a sermon and sing a bunch of worship songs, and that will be the only act of following Jesus that they engage in all week long. Instead, I believe what the world needs is more people to be Christ-like. And what that means is we raise our hands, and this room and all of our rooms at our campuses are a great place to start. We have lots of people. What our world needs is people who will raise their hands and go, I'm gonna stand up under the weight of all of my own burdens, of all of the stuff I'm wrestling through. I'm gonna stand up under the weight of all the stuff in the world that I think I'm supposed to feel nervous and scared about. I'm gonna stand up under the weight of that with my arms out, and I'm gonna self-sacrifice. I'm going to serve people who need to be served. That kind of mentality will change a church, it'll change a city, it'll change your neighborhood, it will change the world. It has changed the world because it is the mentality of Jesus Christ. I didn't come here to be served. I came to serve you. And so the question, Flatirons, is will the orange sticker on the back of our cars, will that represent the church that we attend? Or will the orange sticker on the back of our cars represent to the world around us, that is a dude you can trust in when life falls apart? And that is a guy who's not perfect and he knows it, and so he's not pretending to be. And that is a woman right there who will give herself up to love other people. Flatirons, stand up straight with your arms out and serve the people around you. Let's pray. You just interrupted a prayer. Hey, God, thank you so much for this message today. It's at the very core of your message to the world. It's at the core of who you are. You're looking at us, you're going, I'm not whiny, I'm not needy, I don't need anything from you. I want something for you. And I came here not to be served, but to serve you. It blows my mind. You have every single right to demand that we serve you, and you don't. You say, look at the way I lived my life, which is I love people, I give people forgiveness and grace and mercy, and I serve people, I treat them like I'm their servant. Go live that way in the world. So God, what I'm asking for is that weird mix, that weird balance of courage and also humility. Could you give that to our hearts? That's what it takes to just serve the world around us really, really well. God, would you teach us what it looks like to stand by the people around us just like you stood by us? God, could you continue to work in our hearts and in the hearts of this church so that eventually the first thing out of people's mouths when they see an orange sticker is they serve, man. They serve really well. God, would you please do that in our hearts and in our church? And I love you so much, and I thank you for who you are, and I worship you because of your son, Jesus Christ, who was the first to serve us. And it's in his holy name that I pray. Amen.
Would you guys stand and sing with us? How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. that sealed the promise.